Motherhood, but not quite as we imagine. Thought-provoking, refreshing, straightforward, sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, but always honest. Welcome to School for Mothers, opening conversations we all need to have, exploring ways in which you can be fulfilled as a woman, once a mother. Now, here is your host, mother of 10, Danusha Melina Durban.
Hello and welcome back to the School for Mothers podcast. I'm Danusha Melina Durban, your host, and my special guest is Georgina Fuller. Georgina's a freelance journalist and speaker. She's been a journalist for over 15 years and has written for everyone from Take a Break to Tatler. You'll almost certainly have read one of her pieces. She appears on Good Morning Britain and This Morning on UK TV, and she contributes regularly to BBC Radio 2 and other regional stations. She's a guest lecturer in journalism at Oxford Brookes University and is on the advisory board for Shello, an online space for women to ask advice and seek support. Georgina's mother died 15 years ago, and since then not only has she grieved her mother's death, she's also become a mother herself. It's safe to say Mother's Day has been a bittersweet day for many years. In this episode, I discuss with Georgina what not having a mother means when you're a mother yourself, the things most missed, and dealing with grief. I won't keep you waiting any longer, listeners. Let's dive into my conversation with Georgina Fuller. Now, this is a very special episode because once a year, us mothers are celebrated. All around the world, there are different days, but all around the world, we have one day in which people, mostly our own children, actually celebrate us and thank us. And there's another side to this, though, isn't there? Where those of us that don't have our mothers still actually might revisit our own childhood and the missing of our mothers. And I wanted to have a conversation with Georgina Fuller about being a mother without a mum on Mother's Day. So welcome, Georgina, to this podcast.
Thank you, Danusha. Thank you. I'm grateful to have a chance to talk about this.
And so you've written, you're a journalist, yeah?
Yes. I'm a journalist and a mother of three.
Ah, yes, and a mother of three, of course. And you've written about your own mum quite a bit.
I have, yes. I mean, I kind of crossed the sort of boundary between writing mainly about kind of employers and women in the workplace to writing first person stuff when I was on maternity leave with my daughter, who's now 5. And I wrote about being a mum without a mum because it was something that was very much on my mind at that time. And I thought with each baby that I've had, because my mum died 4 years, I think, before I became a mother, it sort of triggered another bereavement process, really, that she's not going to meet this child or be part of that child's life. So, it was wonderful. It's very bittersweet because obviously having a child is a great joy and a great privilege, but it's just another reminder, a very tangible, real one, that she's not part of my life, that she's no longer with me. And she would have been a brilliant granny. She was brilliant with young children. So I think she would have loved to have met them and be part of their lives. I think she'd have been very hands-on.
And do you find that certain times of year trigger, or intensify grief and a kind of revisitation of that more than others? Or is it a constant ache? I
mean, that's a really good point. I mean, for me, it's been 15 years this year. So it's a long time. It'll be 15 years at the end of March. But I do think that grief is not a finite process. Grief is an ongoing thing. It's something that you live with. I always say to people that you learn to live with the loss. You do get over it to a certain extent, and that you can function, and you're not kind of overwhelmed with sadness every time you hear a song or one of the little triggers. But yes, I think for me, it's always just beneath the surface, always. And Mother's Day, anniversaries, her birthday, anything like that just sets it off. It just makes it that much more. Well, it still feels raw to me. And it is something, as I say, that I have obviously accepted and moved on from. But I carry her with me. She's very much sort of part of me, and we were very close. And yeah, I don't know what it is about Mother's Day, because you should celebrate being a mother. I've been a mother now for 11 years now. So I do celebrate that, but I just think it takes you back to your own childhood and, what you did for Mother's Day and things. I just think it's one of those things where it's sort of paradoxical, whereas I think of myself as a daughter on Mother's Day rather than a mother.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because I don't think about my own motherhood on Mother's Day. I do exactly what you are describing, which is I think about myself as a daughter, and it takes me back to my mother. Two mothers, but it takes me back to my relationship with being mothered, as opposed to how am I mothering my kids? I mean, I have all year to be thinking about that and trawling over my constant failures, to be honest.
Well, I know, quite, yeah, but same. I mean, but Mother's Day, it's just, I don't know what it is. It's sort of the inner child comes out for me in Mother's Day, and I think about, it makes me nostalgic and think about it. And also because for my mum, she died in March, and it was a few weeks after Mother's Day. And that last Mother's Day, I mean, it just wasn't a big thing. She would get a bunch of daffodils or some tulips. We might go out for lunch if I was there. She hated the whole commercialization and the whole American naff, marketing scam, she would say. But, I know she'd appreciate a card and things. But it was obviously, throughout my life, from kind of making cards at primary school to, thinking when I was in my 20s in London or at uni, I must send her a card, must give her a call. It was about her. The day has always been about her for my whole life. And it still is about her. And it always will be. And, all of those triggers, because I had 4 stepbrothers and sisters, or 3 stepsisters, and I remember, and a brother and sister, so I had to share my mum with lots of people. And I remember one of my stepsisters who came to live with us gave her a card one year, and I was really upset and really jealous. Give one to your own mum, leave mine alone. And that kind of inner child that we all carry, which sounds a little bit pathetic maybe now, because I'm past my 40th birthday, but it's still part of me.
Well, no, she was yours. You did have to share. It's not pathetic at all, and not at all. And this resonance, particularly, because I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that she died not long after Mother's Day, does that make it even?
I think
it's another anniversary that's close by, is what I'm getting.
Yeah, and I think, anybody that's lost someone that was really close to them, I think in the run up to the anniversary of their death, it's always, it chokes me up thinking about it. It's just it's just painful, isn't it? Because, and you kind of think, I think, and I'm sure lots of other people do, it's just another day, get over it. Like you say, you're thinking about them, they're probably part of your life anyway, in some way, shape or form. So what does it matter? But I think it is just the significance of it just kind of looms. So I suppose, for me, kind of Mother's Day, and it's also, she died, my middle child was born the day before the anniversary of her death, so that was all difficult. So there's lots of kind of intertwined, the life and death basically intertwined inexplicably. And and not having her sort of tell me, what she would do and what she did when, some of the circumstances that I'm facing.
Yeah, being out on your own, really.
Yes, yeah. The wilderness.
Not having the matriarch, really, to go to, the oracle, the woman before you who bore you, who went through stuff, with you, and she may have had the answers, and she may not. But the fact is, you can't ask.
Yes,
and so that kind of And where else can you go? Where else do you find mother in your life? Where have you found mother the kind of spirit, the sense of being mothered. Do you have anywhere?
Well, I mean, I have my mother-in-law. I have my stepmother. My stepmother is lovely. I am really close to her. She's a nurturer, so she'll do a lovely lunch. She'll have me over. I can phone her up if I want to cry. And I had my granny for 7 or 8 years after mum. You know, my mum's mum, although she was pretty badly affected by her stroke. And then I've got one of my mum's good friends, who's one of my best friend's mums. So there are kind of mother figures, but there's none of that kind of unconditional love. And my dad, I'm really close to my dad, but obviously, you know, he's not my mother. But
it's a different relationship,
it's
isn't
a
it?
very different relationship. But I think just that kind of whole nurturing thing you really miss. And, you know, for me, somebody posted on Twitter the other day about going back home for the weekend, you know, their childhood home. And even though she's got 2 kids, she can still sort of sit there with a box of Quality Streets and her socks and watch telly and, you know, she looks at pictures. And she said she found a picture of her children on the side and she thought, oh my God, are they my children? You know, when did that happen? Because you just regress. And I don't have, you know, I haven't had a childhood home, because my stepfather moved on very quickly. So there wasn't that home, that base. And, you know, my dad's home is my stepmom's home, really. So yeah, I miss that, everything that comes with her, as well as her and what she represented. Yeah,
exactly. There's no actual hub place where your mum is.
No. So all of that is, you process it, you know, you grieve for it and you miss it as well, as the person. And the fact that, you know, I think I'm not very good at asking for help. I'm not very good at being vulnerable. It's something I've had to learn how to do. And generally, you know, mum would be the person that would say, well, she could see when I needed a cuddle, you know, because I'd be vile, I'd be horrible, and slam the door and shout. And she'd say, and then she'd shout back, and then she'd say, okay, what's this about? And then I'd say, oh, well, blah, 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 or whatever it was at school, or something she'd said, and then we'd get to the bottom of it. But, you know, that was because she knew me really well, but there's nobody else that I could be that awful to. Well, maybe my husband would disagree with that, but, you know, there's that's the unconditional love, isn't there, really? Like, I couldn't be like that with my dad or my stepmom. I couldn't risk being like that, you know, in case it was held against me, but I could with my mum.
Yeah, well, your mum could see through your upper kind of outward behaviour, that actually there was something underneath it. Sounds like you're one of those people that needs to have a shout and like bang the door.
Yes.
And rather than being able to say, actually, I just am really, whatever it is, you know, upset, hurt, sensitive, you know, unsupported, somebody help me, you know. Yes. And whereas she knew, oh, okay, it's, you know, that's the top stuff, but underneath there's something more. And it's a commitment to somebody, isn't it? And a lot of us mothers take the shit on the top, but we love our kids and know there's something deeper.
Yes, and I know with my children, and I know with my eldest, he's quite a lot like me, but with testosterone. And I know that when he's shouting and, you know, huffing and puffing, that there's probably something that's upset him that he doesn't want to talk about, or maybe he doesn't even really recognise. So
I was going to say, might not even know it yet. Yeah,
that's right. So, yeah, you kind of go back to that, and that, where does that go? You know, where does that emotion or relationship, that feeling go once that person's died? I don't know. As I say, I mean, I probably transferred it onto my husband, my long-suffering husband.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, ultimately, in any relationship with our mothers, our job is really to be able to process, oh my God, I'm doing that banging. Oh shit, I'm shouting at people. Oh Christ, I've become that evil, whatever, you know, whatever words we use to describe ourselves, like our consciousness, we become conscious and aware of, blimey, I've turned into her. Okay, that must mean what I really need is X. Often our mothers teach us, oh, what you need is a hug. And we're going, no, go away, hate you. And it's like, no, what you really need is a hug. And so then they teach us, if we have that kind of mother, of course, many would say fuck off, wouldn't they? They'd say, go out, don't talk to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, she sometimes said that. Yeah, I mean, yes, but that, I mean, that inner voice, you know, and I think kind of how your mother speaks to you. I mean, it's your first relationship, isn't it? It's your primary carer. So you're seeking to emulate that, but that becomes your inner voice. And, you know, and my mum could be quite cutting, and she could say unkind things. And roll her eyes and things. And I have that in me as well. It's generally a kind of impatience, I think. And so I've got to be really careful that I don't do that to my children as well, because I've got to be really careful to kind of maintain their self-image and to keep their self-esteem up, you know, and I'm really conscious of that.
But what you're really talking about, though, is as much as you've got that attuned monitoring of your need to keep their self-esteem and self-worth up, whereas who's the person that helps you with that because she's not here anymore?
Well, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, well, that's the inner voice, I guess. I mean, that's the kind of strength. That's when I hear, you know, her say, "Come on, Georgie, you know, pull yourself together. You're okay. You know, you've got this," or whatever. So I hear her say that, going, "Come on, darling," you know. So she's kind of given me that ability, I suppose.
Yeah, so you tap into that. You tap into her actually telling you, advising you, really.
Yes, but there's things, you know, I mean, we've talked about this in other contexts. You know, I think motherhood, it can be very isolating, you know, and I've got, you know, as you know, a child with ASD, with autism, and I felt judged and I felt horrendously exposed by his behaviour or by convention, you know, what people should and shouldn't do and how mothers should and shouldn't be and how children should behave. And, you know, that's when I really miss her, because I know she'd say, well, I can't swear on this, but, you know,
you can.
Well, she can. She would use the F word, or she'd say, sod them, you know, what does it matter? And,
okay,
you know,
I'll say it for you. Fuck him.
Yeah,
fuck him, Georgie.
That's what she'd say. And I want to hear that, because, you know, there's times when you just feel like, oh, God. So, and
we need people to say fuck him.
Yeah.
Don't we, to us? To bolster us up, to keep going.
Absolutely, because that would reinforce that, you know, that's my instinct, but I don't feel strong enough to kind of, you know, do it sometimes. So, yeah, that's when I feel her, you know, well, presence, but also her loss.
Exactly.
Very keenly.
But Georgie, surely your job, other than to always have her, I mean, she's not going to go anywhere, is she? In the sense of she lives strongly in you, in your, in those voices and memories and all of those things. But it feels like that ultimately she's kind of guiding you with the fact that you miss her a lot around having an additional needs child, that it's really about getting strong. Like, what would she say? What would your mum say about finding more, I don't know, what's the word, strong, courage, bravery, whatever it is? What would she say right now to you? If you said, Mum, where do I find the courage from to be stronger?
That it's within, isn't it? You know, and she'd say that, and she always used to say, like, you're a survivor, you're the strong one, you'll be all right no matter what. So what's that lovely quote? I think it's The Wizard of Oz. What does it say? It says, you've always had the power, you just had to find it for yourself, or something. Yeah. So I kind of think of that.
It was always within, I think.
It was always within, yes. And so, you know, I think she's sort of given me that ability. And also just, you know, she did her own thing. You know, she worked when lots of mothers didn't work. She smoked and she drank, and she, you know, she didn't always put us first. She did her own thing. And so she's kind of given me, you know, nowadays it's all helicopter parenting and it's all about the children, and children are more precious than ever. And she wouldn't have bought into that. She wouldn't have agreed with that. So I've got a kind of slightly rebellious streak from her, because I think, well, I didn't have that, so I'm not going to mollycoddle my kids. But, you know, society now dictates that that's what we should do.
But if she was here, she'd be saying, fuck 'em. Do it your way, girl.
Absolutely.
Do it your way. You know, this is shit.
And go with your instincts. Yeah, and she was big into, you know, Dr. Spock in the early years, and that was all about trusting your instincts. So she's like, well, what do you think? Never mind what someone else thinks. Is that important to you? And I'd say, well, no, not really. And then she'd say, well, fuck it then. So I'd be like, oh, okay. But yeah, I've got a godmother as well, thinking about who's equally sort of just does her own thing. And I remember when my first baby was born and I was off my head on diamorphine, having a lovely chat with her, and she was great. And she got together with her second husband on my birthday, on the day I was born. And so she always says, like, she always remembers my birthday and sends me something, but she also says, oh, it's our anniversary, and I wouldn't have. And he's the love of her life, the first husband certainly wasn't. So she's quite kind of irreverent, and she's very un-PC. And I think I say, what would Mum say, Penny? And she'd say, well, what do you think she'd say? And so she's another person that kind of reinforces. But as you say, she lives in my consciousness. I mean, the one thing I'd say about again with grief and the loss of time, there's all these symbols and things that she loved, which get further and further away. So like the Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth and Jennifer L, and I don't know, Inspector Morse, Poirot.
Yes.
The things that Mum, in the late 90s, Charles and Eddie, that song, Would I Lie to You? There's lots of things that,
yes.
Elton John's Sacrifice, there's lots of things that I remember her kind of dancing around the kitchen, and they get further and further away. So, and I remember panicking about thinking, gosh, I'm not going to remember her voice. I'm going to lose the memory of what she sounded like.
Have you got her voice on something?
No, I mean, God, we didn't. She hated having her photo taken, and I think we've got some ancient VHS videos from like Pony Club and things from, I don't know, early 80s where she's probably on it. But she hated being behind the camera. But I can picture her quite clearly. So that's as good as it's going to get. But it's made me more conscious as a mum about putting myself in the frame, literally putting myself in the frame, so that if anything happened, then they'd have lots of pictures. Well, and when I do eventually die, I'll have lots of pictures of me and us, and lots of memories. And it's also made me really want to do lots with my children and take them to lots of places and experience lots of things with them, so that they always have that. Because I think, I don't know about you, but I mean, I felt like my mortality, because Mum was 57 when she died and I'm 42 now. So I keep the back of my mind, I think, oh gosh, okay, 15 years then. And, when she turned 40, I remember the party and the mugs and and then I turned 40, and you have all those sort of landmarks along the way, which are significant.
Yeah, exactly. And I imagine that as you reach 57, that it'll be just all these, as you mentioned, it's the landmarks, it's the anniversaries, it's the memories, the remembrance and the loss. It's big, isn't it? This whole thing, and especially on Mother's Day. And presumably, how present is she actually in your house?
I mean, there's pictures of her. And there's pictures of her when she was a child. And I've got a couple of chairs which were from my granny, which Mum then had. And I suppose the style of my house is kind of done in her style. And I've still got kind of old habitat throws and things that Mum used to have. So yeah, she's there. I mean,
do you celebrate her birthday with the children? Do you actually have like, here's Granny's thing? And
no, because it just hurts. I just feel sad. I mean, I say it's their birthday, and it was the 19th of July, so it's always around the summer holidays or when they've just broken up. So it's a happy time, and it's a happy time for them. But no, I mean, it's painful. It's still painful. I mean, it shouldn't be, should it? Maybe I'm just, I don't know, maybe I should have got over the painful bit, but
no, I think it's really difficult when we just make it worse, when we say, well, this should have healed by now. Surely.
Yeah, there's no,
it's like if we've ever cut, and we go, oh, her cut doesn't, it's like, oh, hers is gone. Well, my scar's still there. I mean, it's like, well, you're you, your body, your emotions, your life. It doesn't fit with somebody else's. It's like, you're feeling what you do feel. So,
Yes. My
Yeah.
One of my other mother figures, a good friend of hers, who died very sadly just before mum of breast cancer. And I used to go back to her house every day after school, and she trained to be a relate counsellor. And she said, I always remember her saying, it's probably a quote from somewhere else. There's no right or wrong feelings. There's only real feelings. And
Yes.
I found that invaluable throughout my life. I always think back to that, and I remember her saying that.
Exactly. So it's real. It's really real for you. And it's funny because it's totally different, but we celebrate the 11th child that's my stillbirth daughter, and Madeline, and we celebrate her birthday. And I was just thinking as we're talking, her birthday's in March, by the way. And I was thinking as we were speaking earlier, oh my God, it was around Mother's Day when I birthed her, I had to go into labour. And I really want to check whether I missed Mother's Day that year. I think I did. I think I actually missed. It's not like I'm owed a Mother's Day. That's not my gist. But I was just like, oh, and we always celebrate Mother's Day and her birthday. I mean, it must be very similar time. Her birthday's March the 25th, so I know the year she was born, obviously. It's etched into my heart. But first I didn't celebrate and kind of stoically dealt with it.
For how long did you?
Not very long. I just realised that, I had to kind of, when it was very fresh, the first couple of years, I mean, my, husband dealt with it very differently than I did. And they moved on very quickly. Also, I had another child relatively quickly. Well, actually very quickly. So the next year I had another child, my seventh child, although Madeline was really my seventh child. And as I realised that I needed to truly honour the experience of the pregnancy, the birth, her impact. It's thoroughly different and nowhere near as enormous as a mum.
It's all relative, isn't it? And I would say that this wasn't. This was the loss of a life as well. It's equally significant, and people are becoming much more aware about this sort of thing, aren't they? Because like the terminology used. I mean, I had a cousin who lost a baby, and I think it was 23 weeks that he was born, so he was a week later, and he would have been viable. And we had a service for him, and he had a name. And
yes,
I know that they remember him. And then she went on to have another one quite quickly, as people inevitably, unfortunately, do. But it's just a kind of band-aid, isn't it, over something? It's not going to.
Oh, yes, it doesn't make anything disappear.
No, of course it doesn't.
No, of course. And I think what's interesting is that I decided that actually being quiet about her and trying to manage myself around that period, because there was a lot of management from Christmas, escalating up to her, the day I found that she was, she'd passed away, that she died, which wasn't when I birthed her, all of that stuff. And then the aftermath, and then the service, then the scattering of the ashes. I mean, everything, you dissect all the pieces, the stages of that. And I was managing that on my own. Nobody else was part of that. And despite sharing that with my husband, actually he was doing his thing. In fact, he didn't. He blocked that and went back to normal. Of course he didn't, but he appeared to be.
That was his coping mechanism.
Yeah, his coping mechanism was that. And then it became so much better when I actually shared it. I shared it with everybody. Like, you know what? And I talked with the children about Madeline. It was clearly they knew about Madeline. I mean, it's not like she disappeared, like mum's got a baby in the cupboard. It was like, yes, she was part of our life. So, we lit candles, we had a birthday cake, we talk about her. Her picture's not up, actually. We didn't take casts of her, hands or feet. We didn't do that. I was very, very poorly, so that I was the focus, to be honest. But nevertheless, it just feels like when there's an honouring and a sharing in a family, it's very lonely. I think that's it. I part of me is like, oh, I wish I could come and hug you. It's very lonely.
Yes.
You know, isn't it?
But I think you do whatever it feels right to you to remember, that person and talk about that person and keep them present and keep them alive. And I think, for your children, they will realise the impact, when they have children themselves. And I think, I had a couple of miscarriages in between the boys, and Charlie, my first one, was a honeymoon baby. So that was literally 8 months and 3 weeks after the wedding, boom. And I thought, well, that's fine, then it'll be the same next time. And it wasn't. And, and I still remember sort of meeting up with a friend, and neither of us had said we were pregnant. And, we were going for a drink somewhere in Soho, I think, and neither of us were drinking, which was highly, highly unusual. And, and I said, are you? And she said, yes. Are you? And I said, yes. And we were both due in November. And, and I still think about her daughter now, Eddie was born in March, so 4 or 5 months older. I still think about, that would have been the birthday. This baby would have been due around my sister's birthday. So, and that wasn't a birth or a delivery, or, that was barely even a thing. But, I think people, you are entitled to feel how you feel about something and commemorate something. So I can't imagine going through a delivery and, holding a baby, which, this has happened to a couple of friends of mine. I went to see one in hospital after it happened, and it stayed with me. And she decided that she wasn't going to have any more because she couldn't go through that again. And then she did in the end, and she's gone on to have a, perfectly healthy child. But also the language and things, that's a whole different podcast, but the language she used around that sort of thing is awful. Elizabeth Day, I think, did a podcast about it where she talked to Russell Brand. And, my cousin was told she had an incompetence. Oh, God, I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate me talking about this. Incompetent cervix. And, with my labour, with my first one, it was failure to progress, and it's all this patriarchal, damaging language that, makes you feel 100 times worse. There's a language around labour and pregnancy that's just, so cruel, really.
Well, it's cruel and it's shaming and failing, and it's, it's denigrating and devaluing of, it just doesn't feel human.
No.
It's, sterile.
And saying miscarriage. And I know there's been articles about, is it Kelly Brook and people that have lost babies, and they've said a miscarriage. It's like, that wasn't a miscarriage. She had a baby. It was a death. It's the way that it's reported, is we have to be very careful and very sensitive about it.
Exactly. And it's sort of because that was one of the pieces in my marriage that, that we had different understandings about the what it was called. Yeah. So Madeline was for him a miscarriage. For me, she was a stillborn. And there is of course a technical difference, a medical term of when, the boundary between a miscarriage and a stillbirth, but when you have a baby and it's a delivery, for me, that's, that's where people change, isn't it? Kind of, we miscommunicate and find that, oh, that's how we cope with a difference. So that reminds me of when you just said, maybe I should be over this. Do you sometimes feel that others wish that you were done with your grieving?
I feel that, like, on social media, as you said, I've written about my mum quite a lot, and I kind of make light of that, that, well, thanks to Mum, I've had all these articles and things, and I sort of joke about it. But also,
it's not a joke, is it?
Well, it's not a joke, no. It's because it's a as I say, it's something that I live with. But I feel like, oh God, people think, oh, here she goes on about her mum again. But there's people that I follow. There's somebody I follow, Poona Bell, who her husband died. Her husband committed suicide 5-6 years ago. She wrote a beautiful book about it, and she's often talking about it on social media. And I'm always interested in what she has to say, and it's always really well put. And, and I've had lots of people message me on social media saying, thank you for giving something a voice. And I've shared this article so that my friends know how I feel, because it's not something I'm able to talk about. And I think for me, it was like, my 20s when she died. I was 27. I was living in London. I had my own flat. I had a great job. I was having quite a nice time, really. And, I sort of processed it, or thought I had. I did have some counselling, and then I kind of got back to business as usual. So, it wasn't really, I don't think, I didn't press pause. I was just kind of running around as usual. So, and I very much, I remember seeing a friend for lunch, and she said, gosh, you've dealt with things so well. And I remember thinking, my God, like past tense, that's it, the book's closed. So, I think because I write for a living, and it's not a duty, but it's something that I want people to know about. If I've got a bigger platform than most people that are sharing with a couple of hundred people on Facebook or whatever, that grief is it's not finite. As I say, it's something that goes on, and we're much better at talking about these things. And I probably didn't talk about it when I was in my 20s. I didn't go and offload to people, and it's not something I necessarily talk about that much to friends anyway. But I think Mother's Day, when you see all the posts about people going out for lunch with their mum and have their lovely posts about their mothers, and for me, I also get bloody press releases. I had one the other day saying, is your mum incredible, flogging some stuff, and then you get all of the florists and M&S and whatever, you get bombarded. It's such an affront, and I should think not just for me, but for anybody that's lost a baby, or anybody that's had IVF, or anyone that's had a awful relationship with their mum. It's going to be, it's a red flag, basically. It's going to stir up all sorts of emotions. So I'm happy to talk about that. And as I say, I don't go out and see my friends and talk about my mum nonstop, but it comes up. And my kind of best friend, she lost her mum in her 20s as well, and we talk about them. And she knew my mum and I knew her mum, and we grew up living around the corner from each other, and so we get each other. So she'll quite often text me, and she always texts me on Mother's Day, and she always texts me on the anniversary. And her mum died I know when her mum died, and I know when her mum's birthday is, because we get it. So she makes me feel a bit less alone. But I think grief can be isolating. So opening up to people makes it less isolating, and makes it not necessarily easier, but it just gives you a sort of sense of camaraderie, and that you're not being ridiculous.
Well, we have a world or a culture obsessed with happiness.
Yes,
and the fun side of life, and actually it's not all fun and hunky dory. And I think there is this kind of feeling of, well, we can give you a few weeks. We could give you a few weeks, and then come on, ping back from having babies, ping back from grief. Once upon a time, if there was somebody in a car crash or something tragic, whatever it is, some form of tragic event in the world, we didn't see the parents of that child that died, or person that died some 6 hours ago, on the television saying, oh, she was a lovely person. I mean, I sometimes watch these statements of people, and I think, God forbid that I ever have to make some kind of statement about somebody that I love within a matter of minutes, hours. And I put together some words that do justice to my person. And yet there's that kind of exposure and visibility of that grief, as if, well, that's it then, you've done it, now onwards. And of course, behind the scenes, that will be lasting impact for a long time, and in different ways, different iterations of the loss. And I think that's the piece that we're talking about, of the aloneness of it. And especially when we're bombarded with Mother's Day stuff, narratives of happy mothers. And as you said, not everybody had a fantastic time with their mother. There's all sorts of fractured relationships.
It is probably the most important relationship of your life. So, the chances of it going wrong are quite high, or the chances of it not being easy and not being the smoothest relationship. And, people have said, oh, well, you're really lucky. You had 27 good years, and yes, God, we did. I mean, we certainly argued, and there were certainly things, that annoyed me about her, and vice versa, I'm sure. But, yes, I did have that, but lots of people don't have that. And that has an impact probably on every aspect of your life, I would think, if you don't. So that's not just going to be something that, oh, they've gone, okay, chapter closed. That's just not realistic. And I think grief has become much more of a public thing now.
Commodity.
Yeah. God forbid, like you say, you watch anybody like Grace Mullane's parents. I mean, I can't imagine when you see people and you see footage, and obviously Harry and Wills have talked about losing their mum in their teens, and we all felt like we knew her. And then there's kind of public grief with like Caroline Flack, and people feel like they are part of our lives, even though they're not part of our lives. Like they could have been somebody that we were friends with. So it's much more tangible now. I think it's much more understandable for people, and that's a good thing. That's a healing thing. Hopefully, getting it out there. It's not something that just isn't talked about.
I think it's normalizing the fact that every one of us will feel some measure of grief in our lives.
Price of love, isn't it? That's what they say. So love someone, then, one day you might grieve for them.
Yes.
And that's something everybody has to live with.
Yes. So what will you do on Mother's Day today?
Oh, God, I mean, we never go out because I don't want to see all the mothers and daughters. I just feel envious and sad. So I'll probably get flowers and maybe some chocolates and all their cards. They always do me lovely cards, and they all come in the morning. And hopefully my husband will cook lunch. Maybe I'll get a lie-in. Maybe we'll go for a walk afterwards. There is a kind of cafe that we quite often walk up to with them moaning all the way up there. Maybe go to the playground. But I don't want to be around other people. I only want to be around my family on Mother's Day. It's not something I celebrate as such, and I try and stay off social media as well. I will share. I might share photos of a photo of my mum, one of the few, or I don't know, have a brief look in the papers. But yeah, it's very low key.
So, do you look forward to it being over?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then it's my son's birthday. He'll be 8 this year.
Yes.
I think a week or two after. And then we're getting a puppy. So that will be taking our mind off everything. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to everything afterwards.
That's good.
Getting it over with always. Anniversaries, Mother's Day. Maybe I should try and celebrate it more. But
when you're ready, Georgie, when you're ready.
Yeah, when I'm a pensioner myself, yeah.
She'd want you to be kind to yourself.
Yes, yeah.
I'm certain of that. I'm not certain of a lot of things because I don't know her, but I'm certain she'd want you to be kind to yourself, and not harm yourself.
No, she wasn't great at being kind to herself. She was very self-critical.
Yeah, I imagine that would be very important to her. So whatever it takes to do your thing, to, literally do your own thing. And if that means across the current of what is seen as typical, then fuck it, do it.
Yeah.
And if it means being off social media and not going and doing any big hoo-ha of Mother's Day, then absolutely that's a version of taking care of yourself, really loving yourself. And I guess ultimately of mothering yourself.
Yes, that's very true. Nurturing yourself.
Thank you for walking your talk on, even despite the fact that you said you're not very good at being vulnerable. Thank you for doing it. And thank you in service of so many other women that actually, find Mother's Day a really difficult day. And thank you for talking with me about your mum. She sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been very therapeutic and cathartic to talk about it.
Georgie, thank you so much for joining me on the show today and for sharing so vulnerably. Listeners, you can find the links mentioned in the episode in the show notes over on schoolformothers.com/podcast. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast. That's it, listeners. Till next week. Same time, same place. Meet me here. Thank you for joining us again. Here's to you. Lots of love.
Thank you for tuning in to the School for Mothers podcast. To continue the conversation and keep your dose of inspiration up, head over to schoolformothers.com/podcast, where you'll find bonus content from Danusha and her guests on habits, recommendations, books, best apps, time-saving secrets, life hacks, health, sleep and anything in between. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast.